Our next reader is a man we have to thank for allowing us to come here, and he's always amenable in that respect. He first moved to the Borders in 1973 and founded the Damascus Rum Cafe with his wife Frances on April the 2nd, 2005. The cafe will soon celebrate its 10th anniversary. His book, The Story of Damascus Rum, is about to be translated into German. Today, he will read from his second book, Satiana and the House of Mercy. A big round of applause for Mr. Chris Ryan.
Hi. Yeah, this is a first draft, so and it's there, but it's not printed yet. It's not published yet. And just in brief, a young lady, she's Circassian, living in the Middle East. She originates from the village of Kfar Kama in Palestine, and now she's in Beirut in a mountain villa, which, if anybody's read the other book, there's a little connection with that, in that this villa is run by the sort of erstwhile mistress of the hero of that book. But this is much later on. It's around the turn of the century, 19th, 20th century. Anyway, and she's an assistant to this old lady who runs soirees and things up in her mountain place. The soiree was memorable, but the details passed just as the rush of noise and sparks of light of a display of fireworks, exciting, dazzling and full of fun, passes and leaves only silence and smoky darkness in its wake. But one detail remained: Halil. The strange beauty behind that name, the beauty behind that face of sadness, the gentleness hidden within that defensive look, within that frightenedness which seemed to long to be smoothed and made safe. It was the beauty that took her again in memory with all its terror, the terror that comes with the fear of losing that precious thing, that inexplicable, infinite moment which exists beyond time and space when love comes. He had arrived at the Beit, that's the house, the Beit al-Rahmah. The book tentatively is called Sataniah and the House of Mercy. He had arrived at the Beit with a number of young bucks, poets and would-be world changers from down in Beirut, brash and happy, full of inspiration and certitude of youth discovering themselves for the first time. Some were still at college. One was an editor of an Arab newspaper which was always being censored, if not actually closed down by the Turkish authorities for espousing nationalist views. Halil was different. Not that he wasn't as arrogant in manner as his friends, or as disdaining of the past nobilities and forms of ancient wisdom in which his ideas were rooted, but the expression in his face, in his words, in the poems he read, were filled with a sadness that seemed to rise from some place so deep inside that when Sataniah looked at him, she heard this plaintive cry within her own heart. And then she had recognized him as the boy with the long hair she had seen on the docks coming down the gangway of the ship from America, before she herself had left for Palestine. It was the same look then that had taken her gaze for just a moment, although she had not absorbed it at the time, being still held within the nimbus of delightful ease after imbibing the fabled bouillabaisse. Their conversation at the table had been brief, occupied as Sataniah had been with helping serve up the food. She had been invited to the soiree. Lady Gulbahar had been quite definite that her presence at these evenings was to be an essential part of her education. However, there was much to attend to besides exchanging witty repartee or expounding knowledgeably on subjects which as yet seemed of little concern to her. The political situation in the Middle East, in Beirut in particular, was always a hot topic, and this soiree was no exception. The Arab nationalists were represented as usual, and the arguments flowed back and forth over whether one could say that the idea of a nation was a matter of religious consciousness, cultural identity, linguistic unity, or the expression of common political will. In the last mentioned, all were in broad agreement that any nation of Arabs would necessitate the removal of the Turkish, that is, the Ottoman overlord. They had eaten well and drunk even better, and the conversation had been boisterous and quite argumentative, in particular between the editor, who had claimed any Arab nation must be based on the Quran, and the Maronite students who objected, saying that any Arab nation had to include the Christians of the Levant, and the Jews too for that matter, on equal terms. Halil had broken into the argument by calling for a return to the values of the Abrahamic religions without any forced adherence to a particular stage of the nation's religious development, so that even the agnostics and modern free thinkers could be at a liberty to maintain their views. We cannot hope to bring our Arab nation into the modern era if we simply depend on the laws and mores of desert tribes. We must extend our thinking beyond tribal loyalties to an inclusive system of universal human values. He said this with conviction and passion, and was about to launch into a thesis whereby he married the ancient prophetic wisdoms to the spirit of the Age of Enlightenment, and explain his inspired vision on human rights in which all people partake of a single humanity. But the wine had taken over the conversation, and his words were lost on most of those present, who preferred to get bogged down in an intellectual morass over the meaning of Arab that had become ever more divisive, with little chance of uniting the warring parties. He turned to look at the young lady who had dined with them, who was now clearing away the detritus of the meal. Again they exchanged looks. This time he smiled in a resigned sort of way, as if to say, well, one tries. Sataniah laughed, and his expression changed first to mild annoyance, then to concern, as he realized that she was not mocking him, but rather sympathizing with his dilemma. So, what do you think? He said. What do I think about what? Well, everything, nothing, whatever is important. Do you think it matters how we're going to live together if the Turkish yoke is removed? After all, there are those who say it's only the beginning, who say it's the only thing preventing us all indulging in one almighty bloodbath. Sataniah blushed nervously and said the first words that came to her tongue. I think if we understood anything at all about love, anything at all, and practiced it, it would be better for us all. Exactly. Thank God there's at least one sane person here who understands what I've been trying to say. Look, we haven't been properly introduced. My name is Halil. Ah, so that's why. Why what? This interest in Abraham. Abraham is the Halil. It means he was intimately penetrated by the real, by the God, like a sponge with water. Halil was surprised to find a girl who could converse on his favourite subject. That's amazing. Who told you that? It's just something my father would say whenever he met anyone called Abraham, or Ibrahim, or Halil. He used to say that people called Abraham were often big people, as if they carried a lot of responsibility around with them. And when he met them, he would say they could soak up love like a sponge soaks up water, because that's what God puts into all of us. But with Abraham, it's just that it's specific. So I'm a love sponge, am I? Halil laughed gaily. Then he seemed to disappear in himself. It was as if he had remembered something and had gone away, completely with the memory, somewhere very far away. Thank you.